When gasoline prices were relatively low, the fuel economy on your push or riding mower was not a major concern, but with gasoline prices soaring to record highs, people started resorting to stealing gasoline from your vehicles in your own driveway. If you want to downplay the situation, I feel for you, but as for me, I know that every time I fire up that mower, it means eventually I'm going to have to make a trip to the gas station to get ripped off again. The worst part is I don't want to think that my mower might be costing me more money than the old mower I just threw away because it was getting a bit old and outdated. In the last video in this series, we tested how long some of the mowers ran on only 8 ounces of fuel. Now this was a stationary test with no load. The results were very interesting as it turned out the oddball Lawn Boy with the Door Force 2-stroke outlasted all the other mowers with a time of 26 minutes and 51 seconds. I then started getting messages to do the same test on certain brands with certain engines, so that's what we're going to do today. And just like in the last video, I was very surprised by the results of this round of testing as well. The first mower we'll be testing is a Husqvarna all-wheel drive mower, and it's fitted with a Kohler 149cc engine. After that, we'll be testing a Craftsman with a Briggs 140cc engine, followed by a Troy build also with a Briggs engine, except this one has the 150cc version. And the last one we'll be testing is a newer Honda HRN with their new 166cc engine. Now this is going to be a very involved video, so I'm not going to waste your time and get right to testing. While the mowers are running, I'll explain how I got to this situation and talk about the testing itself, which I've gotten a lot of comments about. Just on a side note, when I do these tests, they're typically right after I get a mower fixed, and in this case, I thought I'd fix this mower, but as you'll see here in a minute, that wasn't the case. I didn't have the brake cable for this one because I had to wait for it to show up in the mail. For this test, I had to bypass the kill switch, which is something I do not suggest doing. Now, if the air filters are dirty, I'll blow them out with compressed air, or if they're beyond saving, I'll replace them. The oil is either new or still usable, and if it's low, I'll add more oil till it's near full. I'll connect the fuel line from the testing tank to either the carb or close to the carb as possible, either using the fuel filter as a splice or connecting the line to the filter that's already on the mower. I'll then add 8 ounces of fuel to the tank, open the valve, and then check to make sure the carb is not leaking, which has happened before and won't be the last time either. Now when opening the valve, about 1.5 ounces of fuel will leave the tank as it's filling the fuel line and the carb. Once I'm satisfied that the carb is not leaking, I'll start the engine and the timer. Now, we didn't have to wait very long before I realized the carb was leaking fuel, and it was a pretty considerable leak too. I took the carb off and tried to fix the leak, but it turns out the leak was happening in more than one place. Unfortunately, in the end, I had to replace the carb because it made more economical sense. Once the new carb is on, we'll go through the same process and then start the test. This time, after waiting a few minutes, it's not leaking, which I would expect from a new carb, but since people assemble these, they do and sometimes make mistakes. I'll then replace the air filter and then start the engine. Now I do want to apologize for the poor camera panning, but I don't want to edit the film, which would then edit the timer as well. Some people may not realize why the timer changed almost 20 seconds and will cry out shenanigans, which will then make my findings for this test completely useless in their eyes. I did have a couple of viewers ask me in their own special way, when was this video going to come out? And to be honest, I was trying to get the videos done on the mowers that are in this segment. However, because the spring rush is over and we're in the middle of summer's heat wave, I wanted to get this installment out before it got too close to the fall season. That means the mowers you're seeing right now may not have been shown on either of my two channels. That's okay though, as the details of what's wrong with each mower are not given away, except maybe for this one. Now at this point, we've already beat the times set by the PowerSmart mower and the John Deere with the Briggs Intech engine, so let's see if this Kohler can at least beat the time set by the smaller Tecumseh engine and maybe the Briggs Flathead that almost won in our last round of testing. Now I have to admit it, but Kohler engines have not been my choice for anything because they have a few faults with them, from bad airboxes to leaking oil sump gaskets, but as far as fuel economy goes, they seem to do really well. I will say one thing, after this showing by this engine, I might have to consider them for my next engine swap. The Husqvarna Mower with a 149cc Kohler engine was able to run 21 minutes and 43 seconds on only 8 ounces of fuel, which is pretty good when compared to the previous mowers we've already tested. As you can see with that time, that moves the underdog of an engine up to the number 2 spot, which moves the Briggs flathead down to a close 3rd place. To be honest, from the comments and requests made by some of the viewers, they were very happy with how long their mowers lasted on a full tank of gasoline, and after this test, I'd have to agree with them. The next mower on our list should make some of the Briggs people very happy or sad, depending upon their view of the new plastic engines. Next is a fairly used but well taken care of Craftsman Mower with a Briggs 140cc engine with the Plastic Carb. If you've never taken the covers off this engine, it's all plastic till you get down to the flywheel and block. To be honest, I really don't know why they didn't just make the mowing deck out of plastic while they were at it too, but we're not here to talk about the use of materials, and the only material we're interested in is the stuff that goes into the tank. After disconnecting the fuel line from the tank, I realized that the line is larger than a 1/4 inch, which is going to be a bit of a problem here in a minute. After opening the valve and filling the lines and carb with fuel, I noticed there was a leak at the fuel filter. It turns out the line is just too loose, even with the clamp to seal around the filter. To make things easier, I'm just going to remove the fuel line and put our line onto the carb instead. The problem is that the carb now has fuel in it, and I need to run the engine to get rid of that fuel. Once the carb is empty, I can then put the fuel line back onto the carb, fill the test tank with gasoline, and hopefully start the test again. I typically don't have this much trouble testing these mowers, but this new batch is proving to be quite a pain. Now the engine is still warm, which is not the way I normally do these tests, but I don't have the luxury of time at the moment. While this mower is running, I'm going to talk about how I'm running this test. Now, I would like to run this test while putting a load onto the engine, just like it was cutting grass. The problem is I need to apply a consistent load that I can apply to each mower equally. So either I can cut a field that had the same amount of grass each time I mowed with a different mower. The problem is that kind of field of grass is not in my area to use. What about using the flywheel brake to apply a load onto the engine? Now I have seen this done before, but the brake on the Kohler engine could put more force on the flywheel as the one from the Briggs engine. The reason is they aren't the same brake. The design of the Kohler brake does not match the one from the other engines, and since I can't apply the same load onto each engine, I decided the only way to keep the load consistent is to have no load at all. Now, I was given a great idea on how to apply a consistent load, but I'm not sure if I can pull it off. The idea was to use water. They suggested spraying water with multiple jets under the mowing deck that the blade would have to hit. Now, this is a great idea, but I wouldn't know how to calibrate it. Otherwise, I could put too much load or not enough load on the engine. The only difference is this is the best idea I've gotten so far. If you have any ideas on how to put a consistent and repeatable load on the engine, I'd like to hear about it. I have to be honest here, but I'm completely blown away by the performance of this engine. I know I was giving it a hard time earlier, but you can't complain about how well it performed. Now, it is one of the smallest engines here, and it doesn't offer a ton of power, but we're talking about fuel economy here, so that's what we're most concerned about. The 140cc Briggs powered Craftsman Mower was able to last an astonishing 25 minutes and 13 seconds, which means it's near the top of the list. In fact, it puts it in second place, knocking off the Kohler, but with that sort of time, it's very deserving of that place. Now, if you're on a tight budget and you're only mowing a city lot or less and on level ground, try this mower out with this engine. Now, these are not that expensive when compared to the Husqvarna we just tested, and you won't break the bank every time you put gasoline in it. The third mower in this group is yet another Briggs plastic engine, but this time it's the slightly larger version at 150 cc's. The reason I wanted to include it was because I wanted to see what the difference was between the two sizes, and just as a spoiler, the difference was pretty surprising. Since I already know the fuel line is going to leak because it did on the last engine, I'm going to take it off immediately. Now by this time in this video, the setup is getting very routine, so I'm not going to drag this part out. Now, to be honest, if you only mow your yard 20 times a year and only use about 3 gallons of gasoline every year, this testing isn't going to have a big impact on you. But if you're just starting your lawn mowing career as the owner and single operator and can only afford a $250 mower, a $100 trimmer, and a used blower, then you might be using about 20 or 30 gallons a year. If that is the case, then every single expense matters, including fuel. At that point, if you had to choose between a Troy-built mower that had a Briggs 150cc engine on it or the all-wheel drive Husqvarna with the Kohler, you're going to have to decide if the extra traction is worth the extra cost in fuel in your first year. I'm not telling you how to run your business, but I would most certainly be aware of how much fuel you're using and how much it's costing you, because you might have to decide on a different piece of equipment to help increase your profit margin after doing business your first year. Yet again, this plastic Briggs engine has performed really well, and with the time just shy of 24 minutes, you'll have to decide if the extra horsepower is worth the difference in economy. So with an impressive time of 23 minutes and 59 seconds, it moves into third place, pushing the Kohler even further down into fourth place. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to take back first place, but I think the last mower might have a good chance. Now, if I hired a starting lawn business to take care of my yard and they had a mower that had either a Briggs flathead or even a newer plastic engine, I wouldn't think any less of them. At least I know they picked a solid engine to help build their career. The last and final mower in this group is of course a newer Honda with their new 166cc engine. Now I'll be the first to admit it, but they cut a lot of corners on this mower and they're probably going to make a ton of money by doing this. But have these changes reduce the engine's efficiency? We'll find out here in a minute. Unfortunately, this mower came to me full of gasoline, and the work I had to do to it did not have anything to do with the carb or fuel system for once. That means I'll have to drain the fuel out of the tank and also drain the bowl. Now I could just start the mower and let it run dry, but it's much faster if I open the drain bolt. Now the air filter on this one was in terrible shape, so for this one I had to install a new one. Once that's done, I'll then connect the fuel line to the test tank, fill it up with fuel, open the valve, and then start the test. Oh, I forgot, one of the corners they cut was to get rid of the drain bolt. That's okay, loosening the bolt at the bottom works well too, but it will take a little bit longer than if I had a dedicated drain bolt. At least they didn't get rid of the fuel valve. If they had gotten rid of that, I would think Honda was really hurting for money. Although I might be speaking too soon, because who knows what they'll take off the next model. So would I consider buying a new and trimmed down version of a Honda mower? And the answer is of course. Even if this whole mower was made out of plastic, had cheap wheels, and didn't even have metal sleeves in them, I would still buy it. I still think Honda would do a decent job even when it comes to cutting corners. Although knowing how cheap I am, I would just wait for someone who was giving one of these away and then of course fix it. So the question now becomes, would I replace the Honda HRX mower I'm using right now with a free cheaper HRN model? And the answer is no. The reason is that I'm going to try and keep my old HRX going for as long as humanly possible, but as soon as that engine breaks on it, which I've been expecting for the last 6 years, I would then put this cheaper Honda into service, but until then, I would keep this mower in long-term storage. So we're almost at the bottom of the fuel tank, and I hate to say it, but I don't think this cheap Honda is going to break any records today, but at least we beat my old Honda's time, so at least that's an improvement. To be honest, I think the cheap Honda did pretty well. The engine is slightly larger than the GCV 160, which I haven't tested yet, but it did perform better than my old 186cc Honda, so things have gotten better over the years, despite the corner cutting. So in the end, the cheap Honda ran a very decent time of 23 minutes and 37 seconds. Now for something that's been minimalized and trimmed down, I'm okay with its performance. And with that time, it moves it into 4th place, which moves the poor Kohler down yet again to 5th place. To be honest, I've been really impressed with all these mowers I just tested. They all did exceptionally well, and I wouldn't mind using any one of them on my own yard if for some reason I couldn't get my Honda to work. Which one of these mowers would you pick to use on your own lawn, or better yet, if you were going to start your own neighborhood lawn service, would any of these mowers be included in your lineup of tools? I don't think I have to tell you which one I would pick. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.